Hi everyone, this is Mrs. Gilman, the Media Specialist here at Peachtree Ridge, and today we're going to talk about the research process as you prepare for your research project. So, the first thing that you need to understand is that research may feel like a bunch of contradictions. You have to show that you've done your research, but you also have to write something new and original. You have to appeal to experts and authorities, but you also have to improve upon or disagree with experts and authorities. You have to improve your English by mimicking what you hear and read, but you also need to use your own words and your own voice. You need to give credit where credit is due through using parenthetical citations in a works cited page, which we're going to go over today, but you also need to make your own significant contributions. So in your research, you may be required to use primary sources. So you need to know the difference between a primary source and a secondary source. And if your teacher gave you a handout, this is going to be the first question on your handout. What exactly is a primary source? Well, when we say primary, we mean original, the original work. Like if a president gives a speech, or a writer writes a poem or a short story, or an original video, or a journal article, or a book, or a speech, it's the original work. And then when you have a secondary source, it's a review of that work, an analysis of that work, a review of a particular genre, an article or essay about the work, a biography of the author, a print or electronic reference, a textbook, etc. So a primary source, an example would be if you had a diary. That would be your primary source. Now, if I were to read your diary and analyze it and write about it, which might be a little awkward, but if I were to do that, then that would be considered a secondary source. So you need to understand the differences between the two so that if you're required to have a primary source, you know exactly what that means. So for your first question, just write down primary equals original, secondary equals analysis. One of the most important things I'm going to talk to you about today is plagiarism. Now, in the past, I've been a language arts teacher, and I have caught several students plagiarizing, and I'd say about 60 to 70% of them have done it on accident. So I want to make sure you understand what plagiarism is and how to avoid it so that this doesn't happen to you. Because guess what? When you get to college, what do you think happens to you when you plagiarize? Your professors are not going to be very forgiving, and in some cases you could even get kicked out of college. So let's talk about the definition of plagiarism. Now on your worksheet, if you have one, this is the actual definition of plagiarism, the act of presenting the works, ideas, images, sounds, or creative expression of others as your own. It's considered theft, it's considered cheating. Now you don't have to write all of that word for word. You could just write down presenting ideas as your own when they're not. So if you need to pause this and write that down, then go ahead and do that. But we're going to move on and talk about the differences between intentional and unintentional plagiarism. Now I know nobody would actually intentionally plagiarize here at Peachtree Ridge, but just so you know what it means. Copying a friend's work, buying, borrowing papers, cutting, pasting blocks of text without documenting. This one right here, this is a big one. A lot of students forget to document their sources, which would be unintentional. So that's why you want to make sure you pay attention when we talk about citing your sources. Media borrowing without documentation, web publishing without permissions of creators. Now, unintentional, this is where a lot of students mess up. Careless paraphrasing. Now, paraphrasing means putting something in your own words. So let's say you're reading an article and you're like, oh, I like that fact. I'm going to put that in my research paper. So you put it in your own words, but you don't change enough of it. So that could be considered plagiarism. You're taking too much of the author's original words and the author's original sentence structure. Poor documentation, forgetting to cite or citing the wrong way or citing the wrong source. So that's why it's important to take good notes. Translating, rephrasing another work without citing. Now, a lot of students are surprised at this next one and don't realize that this is actually considered plagiarism. If you have a paper that you've written for another class and you turn it into a different class without the teacher's permission, you are plagiarizing. I guess technically you're plagiarizing yourself, but that paper has a different purpose than what it intended. So you want to make sure you check with your teacher before you try to do something like that. Students in college have actually gotten in a lot of trouble for doing something like this, so just be careful there. Failure to use your own voice, and quoting excessively. If you turn in a paper and it's all just direct quotes and nothing from you, that could be considered plagiarism. It needs to be a balance of your ideas, your analysis, and facts that you find from other sources. So reasons not to plagiarize. Obviously, you cheat yourself in your learning. When you give credit to authors, when you have sources in your paper that you cite, that makes you look like you know what you're talking about. It gives you authority. It lets other people locate your sources. It's unethical. You'll get a 0 here at Peachtree Ridge. You'll get a referral, parent notification. In college, you could get kicked out. So just don't do it. Real life consequences. So what I've done here is I have done some research on famous people who have plagiarized. And I have cited my sources so that you can see exactly what I mean by giving credit to where you get information. So look at this lady right here. Does she look guilty? What do you think she did? Her name is Doris Kearns Goodwin, and she actually had to leave her television position. She had to step down as a Pulitzer Prize judge because she stole 50 passages for a book that she wrote. Now, I found this information from another source, and I put it in my own words. I changed the words around, I changed the sentence structure around, and then I cited it parenthetically. You can see my parenthetical citation right here. Where is the period? At the end. So here is my author's last name. Now, if there was no author here, I'd put the title of the article. So if someone were reading this presentation, they would flip to my Works Cited page, and they would see this source listed. And that's exactly what I mean by citing your sources. Now, notice right here, I have a picture citation. Now, I know some of you guys are guilty of this. When you have a project that you're doing and it requires pictures, you go to Google, you click on images, you pick whatever image you want, and you put it in your presentation. Now, did you know that you need to cite that picture? And if you don't cite that picture, you could get in a lot of trouble. You're breaking copyright law. So you want to make sure you give credit on anything that is not yours. If you didn't physically take the picture, you need to give it a citation. Okay, hopefully you know who this guy is. Vice President Joseph Biden. Did you know that he got in trouble for plagiarism? Did you know that he actually wanted to run for president in 1987? Well, he was senator at the time, and in law school, he plagiarized in a class and as a result failed the class. And so that came up during his presidential nomination. And so he was forced to resign. He also had a speech where they say he copied he copied from a campaign speech of Robert Kennedy. There were parts that were plagiarized that he didn't give credit to. So you'll notice my parenthetical citation right here. There's the author's last name, and then there's my picture citation. I also have this information up here about a college where there was a probe of plagiarism, 45 students were dismissed, 3 graduate degrees revoked. This kind of stuff happens all the time, so that's why it's important to be very, very careful. Okay, this guy, Jason Blair, this was a big deal during this time. He was a reporter, and he was forced to resign after being accused of plagiarism and fraud. The newspaper stated that at least 36 of the 73 articles he had written had problems with accuracy, calling the deception a low point in the newspaper's history. So, here is my parenthetical citation. Why do you think I put the title of the article here and not the author? Because there is no author. So you always put a citation, and in that citation you put the first thing listed on the source entry. There's my picture citation. You'll notice that this is a direct quotation. This means that this is taken word for word from another source. Now notice these single quotations within this direct quotation. This is kind of tricky. Let's say you take a fact from another source, and in that fact you decide to take it word for word. In that fact there's a quotation. That's when you're going to use these cute little single quotations to indicate that. So just a little fun fact there. Here's another example about how plagiarism can ruin your career. The Germany's education and science minister was forced to resign over this plagiarism scandal. A university panel found that the Christian Democratic Union minister guilty of deliberate deception for using foreign text passages without proper citation in her 33-year-old thesis. So she wrote this thesis a long time ago. And so somebody decided to start looking at her thesis and realized, hey, this is plagiarized, and she didn't cite her sources and give credit where credit is due. They called her out, and she was forced to resign. Notice here I have a direct quotation. It starts right here. I have a lead into my quotation, which we're going to talk about. I have a quotation within a quotation. That was little single quotes, which may happen. And then I have my citation. There was no author of this article, so I have the title. What do you think this ... means? Basically, this means the title of the article was really long, so you can cut it off after about 3 words and just do a ... to indicate, hey, the title's longer than this, but I don't have room for it. Okay, here is another example of plagiarism, and this one's a little bit more recent. France's top rabbi ended up having to resign recently in this plagiarism scandal. He was accused of using text in his work from a philosopher, and when he was first blamed for this, he turned around and said, no, this person ended up plagiarizing, not me. And so then he eventually had to come clean, admit to his plagiarism, and take his consequences. And there's my picture citation, and there is my article citation. So there is an example of research and showing your citation and giving credit where credit is due. So why is this important? Why is plagiarism important? Well, what if your architect cheated his way through math class? Would your home be safe? What if your lawyer paid for a copy of the bar exam to study? Would the contract she wrote stand up in court? What if the accountant who does your taxes hired someone else to write his papers and paid a stand-in to take his major test? Does he know enough to complete your tax forms properly? What if your doctor cheated his way through surgical techniques class? Would he remove your appendix or spleen? How much would it matter? I think it would matter, wouldn't it? And then here's my citation where I got some of these ideas from. Notice that there are two authors, so I put both of the authors' names with an and in the middle, and I got it from this page. Okay, so here's your pop quiz. You didn't know you were going to have a pop quiz, did you? Okay, this is going to be a question on your handout. So it will say pop quiz number 1. This is going to be, I believe, the third question on your handout. And so I want you to look at this original source, and then I want you to look at what the student wrote in his paper. And you can pause this if you need to. So here's the original source, and the student wrote this and then turned it in. Is this plagiarism? Take a second to read that. And then circle your answer on your handout. Okay, let's see. What did you say? Did you say it was plagiarism? Because if you did, you're right. It is plagiarism because the first thing that I noticed was there was no parenthetical citation in that student's entry. So they didn't even give credit where it was due. But not even that, even if they had cited it, they didn't change enough around. They should have used quotation marks around the words that he or she copied from the original source. And there's no parenthetical citation, like I said. So here's a correct way to do this. The existence of a signing ape, so this is taken word for word, seemed to be unsettling for linguists, and it was also startling for animal behaviorists. And here's my citation with my page number. So anything that I take word for word, I put in quotation marks. You see how the student weaves his or her words with the original words. So that would be a correct way to do that. All right, let's look at your next question. This is going to be, I think, number 4 on your handout. Pop quiz question number 2. Here's the original source. Here's the student's paper. Now already I see this citation, which makes me happy, but look closely. Is this plagiarism? Circle yes or no. Did you say it was plagiarism? If you did, then you're correct. Now a lot of students are surprised by this. But let's look at why it would be considered plagiarism. Just because you cite doesn't mean that you're safe. You've got to do more than just right-click, synonyms, choose a different word, just change a couple words around. So the writer did a good job of substituting synonyms, but they didn't change the sentence structure around. So you've got to do more than just substitute synonyms. You've got to change the whole structure of the sentence. So think about your 4 sentence types, and hopefully you remember them. Simple, compound, complex, compound, complex. So you want to change that around so it's completely different, so that it's not obvious that you are using it from this source. So in this case, it was obvious that the writer could not have written his sentence without a copy of the source directly in front of him. So let's look at another way to do this, a correct way to do this. This student changed the entire sentence structure around. According to Joyce Valenza, there's another way to cite right there. I put the author's name in the lead-in. Linguists and animal behaviorists were unprepared for the news that a chimp could communicate with its trainers through sign language, and then I have my page number. So since I have my author up here, I don't have to include it down here, which we're about to go over. But notice how they didn't just change a couple words around, they changed the whole sentence around. So after seeing this, you may be a little worried that you might accidentally plagiarize. So let's talk about how to tell if you're plagiarizing. Okay, here's a nice little organizer that kind of lays it all out for you. So here's a question to ask yourself. Are your own words being used? Yes? Okay, that's good. Is it your idea, though? Yes? Okay, good. You're not plagiarizing. If it's not your idea, you're paraphrasing. You're putting it in your own words. So now what? Now you need to add a citation. You need to put a bibliography in. Okay? Now let's look up here. Are your own words being used? No. So then you need to use quotation marks. Are you using quotation marks or placing it in a block quotation, which we're going to talk about? And if you say no, you're plagiarizing, you need to quote it. If you say yes, then you're good to go. Okay? So how to avoid plagiarism: practice good research methods, know how to quote, how to paraphrase, how to cite, which we're going to go over, know when something is common knowledge, keep track of every source that you use, and EasyBib is going to help you with that. There's tutorials on our Media Center website that's going to show you how to use that, taking good notes, and indicate in your notes which ideas are taken from your sources and which ideas are your own thoughts. So you may remember this from language arts classes in the past, where you do 2-column notes. You put your source information up here, and then you have your concrete details, which are direct quotations, paraphrases, summaries. And then you have your commentary on the other side. So for every fact you have an analysis on that fact, an explanation, your reactions, etc. So you have, for each source, you have a different table. So that's one way to take notes, and that's called the Cornell note-taking system. But another way to take notes is through EasyBib. Now, we're not going to go into EasyBib in this tutorial, but there's a whole tutorial on how to take notes using EasyBib on our Media Center website. In this notes, you have you can choose your source, you put your fact, or you paraphrase, your commentary, and that would be considered one fact. So for every fact that you find, you create a new note. And it will look something like this, where you have all your notes together, you can drag them over into an outline. It's really pretty cool. So when you are taking notes on your research, we highly recommend that you use EasyBib for this. So, using existing knowledge. Use your own words, your own voice, your own ideas. You need to paraphrase, you need to quote, and you need to cite both of them. So this is going to be a question on your handout if you look at your handout. What is the difference between a paraphrase and a quote? Well, paraphrase, like I've said before, you restate information giving the meaning in another form. A quote, now a lot of students get confused on this. They think, hey, a quote is like dialogue. It's like people talking. No, not necessarily. A quote is just something that you take from another source and you repeat the wording exactly, and you use quotation marks to indicate it's taken exactly. And then when you cite, as you saw in my examples before, you use parenthetical citations, or you include it in the lead-in of your fact, but you give credit to the author of the material, and if there is no author, you include the title. So for your answer, write paraphrase, restate information in your own words, and quote, repeat exactly, repeat wording exactly. So take a second and do that. Pause this if you need to. But we're going to go ahead and move on. A parenthetical citation. Okay, I know that's a lot of information right now, but essentially, parenthetical citation, like I've shown you before, is when you identify the source by the author or title, and it's called a parenthetical citation because obviously it's in parentheses, period goes at the end. Now, you'll see a page number here. If you have a book or you have an article that gives you a page number, then you would put that there, depending on where that fact came from. If you pulled a fact from page 278, then you would put that there. If there is no page number, then you just leave that blank. Okay, you need to cite when you use or refer to someone else's words or ideas, gain information through interviewing another person, use fact statistics, copy exact words, reprint diagrams, including pictures, videos, music, use other people's ideas. Okay, you don't have to cite when you write from your own experiences, obviously. Compile generally accepted facts, write up your own results, use publications produced by federal and state governments, use information in the public domain, which you can find online, and use common knowledge, shared information in your field of study. So let's talk about common knowledge for a second. If you're writing a paper and you have a fact in there that you know everybody knows, now think of your audience as your classmates. If it's something that they would know, then you don't need to cite it, unless you take it word for word. So a way to tell if something is common knowledge: the same information is not cited in at least 5 other sources, information that your audience will already know, general information not quoted directly, commonly reported facts or sayings. And examples of common knowledge would be like John Adams was our second president. We all know that, right? So that would be an example of something that you would not have to cite. So let's take a second to process all of that information and look at your handout. Okay, true or false? Do you need to cite your sources when you paraphrase, when you put something in your own words? What do you think? Absolutely you do. And if you don't, it's considered plagiarism. True or false? Do you need to cite your source when you have a direct quotation, something you take word for word? Yes, you do. And the next thing that you need to think about is, when is it considered plagiarism if you just change a few words around? What do you think? We saw that example earlier. Can you just right-click, choose a synonym, and be good to go? No, you've got to do more than just change a few words. You've got to change the whole sentence structure around. So do a little bit of practice with parenthetical citations on your next question. And then another question that you have on your handout, what is common knowledge? Well, we just went over that. Common knowledge, basically something that your audience would already know. So if you need to pause that and catch up on your questions, go ahead and do that. But we're going to go ahead and move on to show you more examples of parenthetical citations. So always mention the author's name if there's an author, unless if there's not, then like we said, use the title. And you can cite in two ways. You can cite, as we saw earlier, in the text of the fact that you're using. So here's the author, Branscombe argues that, here's my lead-in, and then there is my direct quotation, and then there's my page number at the end. So notice I didn't put Branscombe in here because I have the him and the lead-in. So that's one way to cite. There it is. Another way to cite is to put it in the parentheses. So here's my lead into my quotation, which we're going to talk about. There's my fact, and there is my citation with the page number because a page number did exist. So that's a second way to cite. And then, like we said earlier, if there is no author, substitute the author's name for the title or an abbreviated title if the title is long. So here's an example. There is my fact, and there is my title. Now notice my title has quotation marks around it, and that is because on the works cited entry, it had quotation marks around it initially. So place the citation as close to the quoted or paraphrased material as possible without disrupting the sentence. And there's my citation. So paraphrasing, like we said, rephrasing the words of the author, putting your thoughts in your own words, changing the sentence structure. Use your own words, don't just move things around. It's the moral of the story. Okay, if you're still worried that you might plagiarize, a few things to think of. One strategy that you can use. When you read something that you want to use, then put it aside, and then write the fact as you remember it without looking at the original text. Only rely on your memory. Then go back and check what you wrote down with the original to make sure you didn't mistakenly borrow phrases, and if you did, then put those in quotation marks, and make sure that what you wrote down was accurate. Then, when you put it in your final paper, you can begin your fact with a lead-in, putting the author's name if you wanted to. And notice, if, like I said earlier, any unique phrases, to put quotation marks around it. So here's an example. Savage inequalities was a unique phrase, so I put quotation marks around it, and then I have my facts, and there's my citation. Okay, direct quotes, as we said, exact words of an author copied directly from the source, and they must be cited. Now let's talk for a second about tagging, leading into your quotations. You never want to leave a quotation by itself. You always want to lead in or lead out of it. So you're weaving your words with the words of the text to where it makes sense when you read it out loud. So let's look at this one. In his investigation of social identity, The Uses of Disorder, Sennett defines adulthood as a stage where people learn to tolerate painful ambiguity and uncertainty. So you notice how their words are woven with the words of the author. Okay, no quotation should stand by itself, like I said, so here's some more examples of leading in. The great philosophy on life is showed in the statement, all life is an experiment. There's my citation. And then here's another example of a lead-in, a more sophisticated one, because it's not just saying, here is the statement, here is something that's said. It's sort of making a sentence out of your words and their words. So let's look. Though it may seem expensive to keep a person in prison for life, so that's the student's words, roughly it's costing us $2 million more to execute someone than it would cost to keep them in jail for life. And there's my citation. So you want to aim for something like this, where you weave your words with their words and it sounds good. It makes sense. Okay, when quoting directly, keep the person's name near the quotation. Only select the direct quotations that make the most impact in your paper. This is a common mistake that students make. They go quote crazy. They put quotes all over their paper and there's not a whole lot from them. So you don't want a whole lot of quotations. You want just the best ones and the best parts of ones. Obviously put quotations around the words. And then let's talk real quickly about brackets versus this ... that you see. Okay, before we move on, take a look at your handout, if you have one, and let's just make sure we understand everything we've gone through so far. So, if there is no author listed, how do you cite the source? What would you put here? If you put title of the work, then that's correct, the next thing listed. And what is a tag? Well, a tag, a lead-in, it's a lead-in to your quotation. It's weaving your words with the author's words. So now let's look at brackets. Okay, let's say you have a quotation that you're going to use, and you're like, you know what, my readers aren't going to understand part of this quotation. They really need to better understand what they're talking about. So I really need to just put my word, like a couple words, in that quotation to make it make more sense. That's when you're going to use brackets, when you're adding your words in a quotation. So more than 130 of them in dozens of countries still operate blah, 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 okay? So first the student put a tag. According to researchers, blah, 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 more than 130 research reactors. Notice how the student is putting their words, research reactors, in there, and they put brackets around it. And what they're telling their teacher is, hey, I'm adding my words in this direct quotation so that it makes more sense to you. Cool? All right. An ellipse. An ellipse is the dot, dot, dot that you see. Now, ellipse is going to be kind of the opposite of brackets. So let's say that you're like, hey, this quotation is awesome, but I don't really need all this junk in the middle. I only need really the first part, the last part, or whatever. So what you're doing here is you are telling the readers part of this quotation has been omitted. Okay, so here's the original, and the student adds a tag, and then the student says more than 130 research reactors, dot, 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 still operate, so that indicates part of that's taken away. Now the key here, guys, is to make sure that the sentence still makes sense when you read it all the way through with the dot, 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 okay? So more than 130 research reactors still operate with HEU fuel. Okay, that makes sense when you read it all the way through. Okay. All right, block quotations. That's one of your questions on here. Let's say that your teacher may require you to have a block quotation, so you may want to ask him or her. But a block quotation is going to be when you have a quotation that extends for more than 4 lines. And when that happens, you're going to block it off. You're going to kind of indent it in. I'm going to show you what that looks like in this freestanding block. And the difference is that you omit the quotation marks, and your parenthetical citation comes after the closing punctuation mark, which feels backwards. When quoting verse, maintain original line breaks. This would be kind of in a language arts class. So let me show you what that means so that makes more sense. Student leads into their quote. All of this is taken word for word, but because it's more than 4 lines, notice how it's all indented in the paper, and there's no quotation marks, and the period is before the parenthetical citation. Now, I would guess that most of your classes will not require this, but maybe a couple of the AP Language Arts classes may require a block quotation. So if that's the case, then make sure you follow these directions. If not, then just ignore this part. So for your answer, block quotation when you have more than 4 lines of a quotation. Okay, works cited page. I believe this is one of your questions. Basically, it's where you keep all of the sources that you use in your essay. That's key right there. Everything listed on your works cited page should be used in your essay. Basically, this is so your teacher can go back and see where you got your sources, and there needs to be a direct connection. All right, this is very, 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 very important. I would say this is one of the most common mistakes that my former students used to make. When I would grade their paper, I would see this parenthetical citation, or the citation could be up here in the lead-in, and I would immediately flip to the works cited page and check off that that source has been used. Okay? Now, what happens if I see this parenthetical citation and I flip to the works cited page and I don't see that source listed? What could that be considered? Plagiarism, because you're not giving that source complete credit. Okay, so one of the most common mistakes my students would make is they would cite, but they wouldn't list that source on the works cited page, or they would cite it incorrectly. They would put like biochemistry in there, and when really there is an author. So make sure it's the first thing on that works cited page that you see. Okay. Now, sometimes the opposite would happen. I would get to the end of the paper, and I would have some sources on their works cited page that I haven't checked off, which means that they were not used in their paper. So you want to make sure that everything found on this works cited page is cited in the paper, and everything cited in the paper is found on the works cited page, if that makes sense. So what I would do before you turn in your paper is go check your citations and have your works cited page in front of you and just check them off that you did in fact use them all. Okay, works cited page, ABC order, hanging indent. Guys, EasyBib is going to do all of this for you. So when you put your sources in there, it formats it for you, already ready to go. Double spacing, and like I said earlier, make sure that there's that matchup, that connection there. And also make sure your works cited page is in the same document as your paper. When you get to the end of your paper and you have that header at the top where it numbers your pages, the very last page of your paper should be your works cited page. Should be in the exact same document. Here's what it looks like. So if this is a student's works cited page, I would see gross somewhere in their paper. I would see the man makes the hat cited somewhere in their paper because there is no author. I would see this last name somewhere in their paper. So notice the header remains. This is the last page of the paper. Hanging indent, EasyBib is going to do that for you. ABC order. Beautiful. Okay, our Media Center website, if you put your cursor on Research Resources, you'll see handouts and tutorials, and that's going to give you step-by-step instructions to EasyBib. It's going to have this a PowerPoint presentation on there and lots of other resources, an example of a paper on there, lots of other resources that you can use. When you do research, you want to use the county databases. And the reason for this is that when you go to Google or you go to Bing, you're not always going to get credible sources. Whereas the county databases, it's going to give you, anything you find in there is going to give you credible sources. So there's a couple ways to get there. When you're on a computer at school, on the desktop, there'll be a little icon that says Online Research Library. You can click on that. On the Media Center website, I have click here to access the databases. You do just that. The county spends thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars for you to have access to these credible sources. So you want to take advantage of them. And one of the cool things about the databases is that it's going to give you the works cited information. Because we spend a lot of money on these databases, though, you're going to need a password to access these from home. And they can be found through the eClass student portal. We also have handouts in the Media Center. So in the portal, it might look something like this. You're looking for Online Research Library. It'll take you to that link with all the databases, and there's your password words. And then on your desktop, it looks like that. Okay, so why shouldn't you Google? Well, anyone can create a website. This is a whole nother lesson. We don't have time in this lesson for this, but just you have to be critical users of the internet, and you can't trust everything that you see. Many sites found on Google, Bing, Yahoo are not accurate, they're unreliable, they're not valuable. No one has to approve internet content found through Google, so the databases are different, right? The databases, everything you see is approved by experts, it is credible. If you really feel like you gotta Google, you like that search engine feel, try the database called WebPath Express, whereas it won't give you the works cited information, like the other databases does, but it will give you like that search engine feel. Another one to try is sweetsearch.com. So you may want to write that down, sweetsearch.com. And that's going to give you anything you get through that search engine is going to be a credible source. Okay, here's an example of a paper in MLA format, just so you can kind of see the big picture here. So you've got your name, you've got your teacher, you've got your class, so like 11 CPLA, and you got the date the paper's due. That's called your heading, okay? So you notice that the date is in a weird format. There's no commas. Your teachers are going to be pretty picky about this, so you need to learn MLA format. It's going to become second nature eventually. And then you have your header where you have your page numbers here. And so there's directions, there's a handout on the Media Center website that shows you how to do this, and there's also a tutorial video that shows you how to do this. Then you have your title, okay? And make your title creative. Let's see what their title is. Online Monitoring, a Threat to Employee Privacy in the Wired Workplace. Okay, that's so much better than just online safety or whatever the topic is. So come up with something good and creative that's going to grab your teacher's attention and get them excited about reading your paper. Okay, so when your teachers, you notice they have block quotations in here, which you probably won't be required to have, but you notice the parenthetical citations, they have a direct quotation. This is obviously the title of an article, and if I were to flip down to the works cited page, I would see this listed automatically is the name of the article. I keep going, I see, okay, there's another citation. I bet I would see Keeson on their works cited page, and let's see, I keep going, and I see lots of other, there's another or citation there, and there's another citation. So you see how they do it parenthetically as well as in the text of the paper. And then you scroll down to the Works Cited page, and all of these sources are found in the text of the paper. There's automatically, we saw Adams, we saw some of these other ones. So as I'm looking through the article or their paper and I see a source, I come down here and I check off that it's used. And by the end of the paper, all of these should be checked off. All of your sources should have been used in your paper. And notice how this is in the same document. So that kind of gives you the big picture of what that's going to look like when you get to the end of your paper. If you need a refresher on how to set up your paper in MLA format, you can go to this YouTube video, which is on our Media Center website. Don't forget about EasyBib. It's going to make things so much faster for you when it comes to the research process, and it's going to make it so you get 100 on your Works Cited page. So in summary, take precautions to avoid plagiarism, take careful notes, know the difference between paraphrasing, quoting, change enough around when you paraphrase, still cite it. Use credible sources, like the databases. You should not be going to Wikipedia. You want to avoid .coms if you can, especially if you're getting them through a search engine. Try to stick with things like a .edu or a .org. Stick with the databases, you don't even have to worry about it, and the databases are going to save you time by giving you the works cited information. Refer to the Media Center website. Look through the EasyBib tutorial videos. It's going to show you how to take notes and how to make a bibliography. Look what I did. What is that? This is a works cited page. These are all of the sources listed in my presentation. If you were to go back through my presentation, you would see all of these cited. And it's in ABC order. It's hanging indent. There is one mistake on my works cited page. Can you catch it? Anybody know? It's not double spaced. The whole thing needs to be double spaced, but I ran out of room. So that's pretty much the end of this presentation. So hopefully you were able to answer all of your questions, and you can turn that in to your teacher. Again, remember sweetsearch.com, databases, it's where you go to find credible sources. Go to the Media Center website to find helpful sources. And that's it. So good luck on your research project. Thanks.